I mean, the next part of developing your startup is getting the word out. And that has seriously changed over the last 12 years. With ONEList, even though we were growing at 1% to 1.5% a day, we were still thinking about spending millions on TV ads because we had the money. I mean, so, and
therefore, why not spend it on?
Well, you've got to spend it somehow, and or somebody else is going to come along and outspend you. That's the way it was back then. We were fortunate in that we stumbled upon the fact that mailing lists and groups in general are hugely viral. I think they're some of the most viral things on the internet. And that really powered our growth. And
like, damn, I discovered virality. I can't spend millions on TV.
Yeah, I know. It's better to be lucky than good. But with ONEList, I did do traditional press junkets out to the East Coast and maintaining relationships with journalists and that stuff.
And how much of that was online versus offline journal?
Back then, it was all offline.
Okay. Even for the second Bloglines, you were still?
No. Once we get to Bloglines, things started to change. There was still traditional PR, but then you're starting to see the rise of influential bloggers. With Bloglines, it was interesting. We had a way oversized amount of press for that company for the number of users that we had. There was one stretch where we had an article in the Wall Street Journal every month for 4 months, which you just don't get. And really, we stumbled upon that because with Bloglines, it was fortunate that a lot of reporters use the service just in their daily lives, because the reporters in general are, infovores. And
wait, did you say V as in infovores, or was that a different word?
Hey. So reporters like to write about things they use and things they understand. So the amount of press we got for Bloglines for the number of users that we had was completely outsized, just crazy. And that won't ever happen again because really news and the press have completely changed over the last few years. Newspapers, as you know, are having hard times. A lot of reporters have been let go. So oftentimes, as I've been told by my marketing friends, you put out a press release these days, and there's nobody at the newspaper to pick it up. It just doesn't get picked up. Now what happens then is that there are bloggers that will pick up your press release and run them almost verbatim. So that's one way of getting exposure. But now these days it's more individuals talking to bloggers, talking to tech blogging bloggers and things like that, but also using social networks like Twitter and Facebook. So I mean, it's completely different now than it was 12 years ago.
And so, assuming that at least some of your distribution and promotion is based on virality, we'll leave the definition to the rocket scientist room. Are you trying to design and/or test for those types of distribution, parts of the product right now, or is that something you feel like you can leave till later and figure out, or just use Facebook and Twitter for promotion after you've built the core use product?
Yes. So I mean, you can tweet invites now to your groups on Snap Groups. There will be, and so there's Twitter integration. There will be Facebook integration. It's just a again question of getting something out there and then iterating. So if I look at the number of features that I want in Snap Groups, those are some of the features that I want in there, but I've cut them just to get something out there. But it is something I'm considering in the future.
And just to get more specific with that, are you actually measuring sort of viral coefficients or other types of metrics which are specifically around distribution feature set, or not at the current time?
Not yet. I just want something out there. You'll never have enough metrics. You'll never have good enough metrics. So that's I've always felt that was something that I've always played catch up on. I think I've said this already. So by this slide, I am nothing, since I haven't shipped. But it's important to ship, because once you do, it takes on a life of its own. You may have all these great ideas for your company, but once other people start using it, everything changes. and really, the market will define you. And that's a fantastic thing. Your users are your best advocates. They're your best source of ideas. And so the sooner that you can launch, the sooner that you can start taking advantage of this. And actually, I think it's actually better also to launch with fewer features. Because then over time, as you add features, your users will see that you're continuing to develop the service. They will see that you're actually listening to them, responding to them, and adding features as well. That ties them more closely into your service. It's a virtuous cycle, if you will, and really serves to create a really strong connection with your users. I mean, ONEList, for example, our users said, you've got to create this group for your moderators so that we can, talk amongst ourselves and tell you about what we need. And we had no idea that we should have done that. So we did that, and we were just getting all these amazing ideas from our users about how to improve the service. And they were just loving the fact that we were listening to them and responding, and actually, it gives them a sense of ownership in that they could see that they were affecting the development of the product, of the service. With Bloglines is not viral in any way. So what I did with Bloglines is I had a focus group of power users that would give me feedback. I would use them as a sounding board for ideas. They would tell me what they wanted with the service. So that was good. It wasn't quite as good with as it was with ONEList, just because the lack of the viralness. Snap groups. The plan is, again, to tap into some of these power users, but also to have a larger moderator group that worked so well with ONEList to help shape the service going forward.
With lean startups, this is all about minimizing risk. I am probably one of the more risk-averse people you may know, even though you wouldn't necessarily think that. And it just seems like when you decide to start a company, it's going to be the riskiest thing that you do. So do everything you can to mitigate that risk going forward. So I did that with ONEList. So I moonlit with ONEList because I had a mortgage payment and I had a car payment. I couldn't quit my job. So by doing that nights and weekends, it was a way of making it less risky, to the point where we had 1 million users and we were able to raise $4 million and quit our jobs and be able to pay ourselves a salary that way. With Bloglines and Snap groups, even though now I can put a decent amount of money into these things, again, I'm not putting a lot of money into it, and spending wisely. And again, that's just a way of mitigating risk. And I think that, people think that entrepreneurs are very risky people, but I think actually the opposite is the case. One final thing, one final startup commandment. You do have to, creating a startup is the craziest thing you can do. It's the most stressful thing I've ever done. It consumes your life. It's crazy, but it's also the most fun that I've ever had in my professional career. And one final story. So the first person I brought in to help me with ONEList was an engineer, Scott Schambarger. And I made a bet with him when I brought him in. I said, if we ever sell this company, and I decided to pick a number for some crazy amount of money. I said, if we ever sell this company for more than $5 million, we're going to throw a party and shave our heads. And so we rented a boat on San Francisco Bay the day the acquisition closed, and we had a head shaving party. So that's all I have. So, be happy to answer your questions. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Mark. That was really a lot of fun, as well as educational. So, as usual, we try and limit the questions to a few amazing questions so that we can actually jump into the table discussions. But I'm sure there's at least one or two. Yes?
So if you have a lean startup and the idea isn't the exit, what do you do when you run into another idea? Because if you're devoted and married to one idea, how do you move on to the next one? What do you do with it?
So I guess the question is, with lean startup where exit isn't the goal, what's the goal?
So if you've got one startup and you want to start a second startup, you mean? You know, I mean, there are ways, there are certainly legal and technical ways of dealing with that, right? But if you're thinking of other ideas, then maybe you don't have the passion for the original idea. Or maybe things have changed, and in that case, then there are ways, you can hand it off to somebody else or go for an acquisition, I guess.
Are you happy and content running the company profitably ad infinitum, and do you think that that's a laudable goal just as an entrepreneur to have?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there are many different types of people. There are starters, there are finishers, there are. I mean, with any sort of any aspect of life, depends on the type of person you are. I think I'm more a starter than a finisher, but.
Any other questions, Jim? Greg?
Yeah, I have a question about your ONEList experience. Wondering how much trust or authority you're giving your outsourced person, in terms of like, do they deploy code or does it come through you first? And then I don't know the right way to ask this question, but if you could help characterize how much you're spending. It's probably not per line of code that we need to know, but like about how much are you spending there?
So 2 questions. One is how much responsibility does the programming person at Odesk have in terms of deployment and managing code base? And then second, how much are you spending?
Oh, excellent questions. In terms of responsibility, I think one key for successful outsourcing of engineering work is to come up with projects that are self-contained, if at all possible. So with Andre, he does a lot of the JavaScript stuff for the website. The website does a lot of real-time updating. So what I did was I'm able to carve that out into a test harness, just some files that I can send him that do not have to interact with the rest of the site in any way. And so that he's able to write the code against that test harness without having any access to my code whatsoever. So that's how I'm able to mitigate it. I did not have him sign an NDA or anything like that. I'm not real big on that stuff. For better or worse, I'm not sure. I just never really thought about it. In terms of cost, Andre is $20 an hour. So with JavaScript, a lot of it is just futzing with browsers and debugging things. So he could work 8 hours and change 1 line of code, and I'm okay with that because I know that it's just a real, challenging thing to do. It takes a lot of time. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Mark. So, what do you think about sort of agile development, TDD, these kinds of strategies? Given you're a single entrepreneur who's also a coder, right? I mean, how do you feel about debugging your code and writing tests and doing those kinds of things?
So Dave Siffer is asking about how do you feel about agile development, TDD, and other types of, deployment testing. I was actually going to ask him about usertesting.com, UTest, any of those other usability and testing environments. Is that part of your process yet or in the future?
Well, obviously, I'm not very good at debugging. Or testing, yes. I at the moment, as a single coder, I don't feel the need to have any sort of development process other than a source control system where I can save things and back things up. I've never actually been a part of an agile development team. I think that stuff was kind of developed after I got out of school, and I'm a very old man.
But do you find, what about even simple concepts like MVC and sort of, have you changed the way that you've built your web apps over the last 12 years?
MVC?
Like model view control.
Oh, no, I still use, we developed this technology with ONEList, this templating system called ClearSilver. that's been open sourced. I still use that. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about this because I'm old and set in my ways in that regard.
Can you change your database?
Yeah, I changed the database because I got to mix it up sometimes. I got to make new errors occasionally. But you know, everything's in C++ because that's kind of what I know, and JavaScript. So in terms of the user testing stuff, I'm so not even there yet. You just want to get something out there. I'm at the point friends are using the service right now and breaking the service and getting a fresh set of eyes on things, because once you develop something, you have a certain set of assumptions for if you think a service is easy to use or not, and you really need to get people using it in order to find problems with it.
So I think why don't we proceed into the discussion, but again, I want to thank Mark for a pretty excellent lead startup discussion, and sort of they hope things go right with the third one. It seems like you've been doing okay for the first two, so at least thanks again for sharing the insights.
Thanks, everybody.